Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at a few top tips for wildlife photography. And these are tips and tricks that I've learned over years of wildlife photography. Everything ranging from the kit to camera settings and even down to basic fieldcraft skills. And my first tip is to wear dull and drab colours. Avoid bright colours. Now, I'm not suggesting you go full on camo and ghillie suit and everything like that. Just avoid really bright colours. Some colours can be seen as a sign of danger to some creatures, so just avoid bright colours. My next tip is invest in a pair of thin black gloves. Not only does it help keep your hands warm, I can still operate the back of my touchscreen camera, I can use my phone because they're thin, but it just helps reduce the amount of movement that's visible to your subject. So I'm bringing my camera up, bring it up slowly, as opposed to having these big white hands, which are much more visible, and you're just introducing a load of extra movement that could potentially scare your target species away. My next tip is, using a long lens like this, connect your camera strap to the lens rather than to the body of the camera. If you connected it to the camera, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the connection between the camera and the lens. You're just reducing the amount of pressure on that connection by connecting it to the lens. It's not quite middle, but it's a little bit more balanced. So yeah, connect it to the lens to reduce any damage to the camera and the connection of the lens. Just had an amazing 5 minutes photographing a short-haired owl. Just walking down this track here, I caught some movement over to my right, looked over, short-haired owl, and I just basically crouched down in the hedge behind me so I wasn't silhouetted against the sun, and passed 3 or 4 times. At one point it must have been about 10 foot above my head. Didn't clock me at all. If I'd have been stood up, I'd have been silhouetted and it wouldn't have come anywhere near me, but it hadn't seen me, just basically by crouching down. Yeah, so I think I've got some good shots. I'll put them on the screen now. And that brings me on nicely to my next tip, is get low, get down to eye level. Not only does it reduce the sort of impact you make against the skyline, you're also reducing the amount of foreground and background in focus, and therefore your image of your subject will pop out a little bit more. So getting down low to eye level of the creature, foreground will be blurred, your subject will be in focus, and everything behind will be blurred as well. That's providing you're using a shallow depth of field. So another consideration is if you're visiting places like where I am at the moment, at Kilnsea Wetlands, places in Norfolk, or Leighton Moss, which we've got saline lagoons, is time you visit, so it's at high tide. Because if you're looking for waders, most of the waders will be on the saline lagoons. However, as soon as the tide goes out, they're going to be out on the estuaries feeding on the mudflats. So if you're looking for waders, then coincide your visit to places like this at high tide. So bird hides, they're a good way of getting close to your subjects. You can get some decent shots from the bird hides. But just try and reduce the amount of noise you make when you're entering and leaving a bird hide. I always keep hold of the door handle. Some of these bird hides can be little wind tunnels. And what you get is if you don't hold onto that door handle, some of the doors can slam shut behind you. And then you're going to upset everybody in the hide and scare all the birds away, and you are going to be Mr. Popular. Also, if you're going into a bird hide, turn the volume on your phone down. What you don't want is a phone call, notifications going off when you're in the hide. And again, it's not going to make you very popular. People do talk in hides, but try and keep the volume down a bit. If you're the last person in the hide, make sure you close all the windows and close the door. This one, somebody's left the door open and the sheep have been in and it's full of sheep poo and it stinks. Yeah, so close all the windows, close all the doors if you're the last person out. The next tip is keep your arms in. So if you're bringing your binoculars up, keep your arms in. Using your camera, keep your arms in. It can also help you give you a little bit of stability. What you don't want is your arms flapping about. If I'm photographing something and all they can see is a silhouette, might not deem me as a threat. As soon as I start putting my arms out, as they start seeing movement, a silhouette, then they're going to be off. So yeah, reduce the amount of movement, keep your arms in. So I just want to spend a quick minute talking about what kit I carry. Obviously I'm wearing the dull, drab, neutral colours. I've got my gloves to reduce movement in the bird hides. I've got my binoculars. These are 10x42s binoculars. Obviously I've got my DSLR camera with my 150 to 600 lens on. I've also got a couple of spare batteries and I keep these in my pocket to keep them warm. What I found is that if you're in the top of your rucksack or in an external pocket, they can become cold. And then when you come to need them, they've crashed, they don't work, there's no power in them. So I always keep my spare batteries in my pocket. Also got a lens cloth, keep that in my pocket as well, with my batteries, stop them clanking about. I have my phone, and on my phone I've got various apps for recording what I've sighted during the day, Birder and eBird, a couple that I use. And the most popular one is a free app called Merlin. So I'm just sat here at the bench at the moment, I've got Merlin running and it's picking up all the noises of the birds and it's basically telling me what's in the area. I'm over at Spurn Point at the moment, so I've got one of the local birders radios and it's just been shouted out, there's a fire crest nearby, so I'm going to go and see if I can find that. The most important rule about wildlife photography is that the welfare of the subject is the most important thing. So if you're getting too close to a species and it's starting to show signs of distress, you need to back off. Mountain hares, for example, you can get quite close to them. As soon as they start looking to the side, they're looking for an escape route. So they become in distress, back off. The welfare of the subject is the most important thing. It is paramount. I was once at Bempton Cliffs and there was a bloke shaking the barn owl box post, trying to get the barn owl to come out so he could photograph it. I have never sworn so much at one person in my life. Don't do it. You may disturb them, there might be birds on the nest. You might scare them off, might not come back. So yeah, just keep your distance, use a long lens if possible. Some other rules, never disclose the location of a nest. Believe it or not, in this day and age, there are still egg collectors out there. So you see it regularly on Facebook, people asking for locations of a nest. Don't give it. So the egg collectors are still monitoring these Facebook groups. You also got to remember it is an actual offence to disturb a nest under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So again, just keep your distance. Don't get yourself into any trouble. Another thing I try and do with my images, I try and get a glint in the eye of the subject that I'm photographing. So that generally means that they're going to have to be facing into the sun. So I do have the sun behind me. And it lights up the face, you get all the details on the face and you get that glint in the eye, and it just makes for more of a pleasing picture. Another thing you need to be mindful of is if you are photographing birds, birds generally take off and land facing into the wind. So if you're going down to your local pond and you're looking to photograph some ducks or something, for example, then you need to be upwind of them. Which is complete opposite with mammals. So if you are approaching mammals or trying to photograph mammals, you want to be downwind of them because your scent is going to travel and scare them away. So yeah, birds generally take off and land facing into the wind. When I look back at some of my first photographs, birds on feeders, not natural. So if you do have feeders in your garden, don't photograph them on the feeder. Birds will generally land on the branch nearby before they go into the feeder, and then they'll go back onto the branch and eat the nuts or berries or whatever you put out for them. So focus on the branch, and then when the bird lands on the branch, you're already sort of halfway towards the focus, and it makes a much more nice, pleasing image. So yeah, don't photograph birds on feeders, it just doesn't look right. My preferred time of day for wildlife photography is first thing in the morning. First of all, if it's birds, they've all been hunkered down overnight. So first thing in the morning, they're all active, they're out feeding, they're calling, they're singing. So yeah, first thing in the morning, that's when most species are active. And secondly, from the photographer's point of view, that's when they get the best light, first thing in the morning. It's soft, it's subdued, rather than the harshness of the midday sun beating down on you, casting shadows. So yeah, first thing in the morning and at dusk as well, you get the best light. Some of you may have well heard of the term chimping. So what is chimping? Chimping is the act of checking the screen on the back of your camera every time you take a shot. You're basically looking to see that it's a good shot, that it's in focus, that it's not overexposed. But just be mindful, if you're spending all your time looking at the back of the screen, you might miss that killer shot. You might miss a rare bird or something happening in front of you. And that's the danger with chimping. There's two that I know of. Change of thought of why it's called chimping. The first one, which I quite like, is apparently it's the noise a monkey makes when you see something good. So you get a good picture and you ooh, ooh, ooh. But in reality, it's probably the latter, which stands for checking image subject. I'm definitely guilty of chimping. I want to make sure I've got all the camera settings correct, it's in focus, it's not overexposed. But just be mindful, if you're spending all your time looking at the screen on the back of your camera, then you might miss that next killer shot. Another thing to think about is your background. Here's a picture of a dragonfly. I just took one step to the left and got a nice clean background. If I'd stayed where I was when I first saw it, I'd have had a bit of a messy background, a bit more distractions, and the image wouldn't have popped as much. So yeah, just think about your backgrounds, take a step left or right, up and down, just to make sure you've got a nice clean background, and it just makes your subject pop. And the biggest tip I could give to any budding wildlife photographer is get out with your camera. You are not going to get that killer image or that killer shot, sat on your sofa watching everybody else's pictures on Facebook. You need to get out with your camera. And even if you don't take a shot, potentially you'll have a nice walk. And don't expect to get a killer shot every time you go out. It could take you 10, 20, 30 walks before you get a shot that you're happy with. What you can do is start a little sort of portfolio. Each time you go out, sort of print off A4, your best image, put it in a little folder, and just over the years, just see how you progress, whether you adapt to style, and how your images have got any better. So I'm going to cover very briefly camera settings. Now everybody shoots different, everybody has different settings, and there are thousands of videos out there on YouTube talking about different settings. So I'm going to very quickly cover what my settings on my camera are. So first of all, I shoot with a Nikon D500 and a Sigma lens. My preferred mode is manual mode. A lot of wildlife photographers will shoot shutter speed priority or aperture priority. I like to shoot in a manual priority or manual mode. So I've basically got two dials, one for my thumb and I can change the shutter speed, and one for my forefinger where I can change the aperture. I have it in autofocus continuous, so AFC, and I shoot in burst mode. So when I'm pushing my finger down, I'm taking multiple shots. My aperture is generally set at f6.3 on this lens when it's fully extended, and if I pull the lens in, it's down to 5.6, I think it is. But I generally have the aperture as wide open as possible, and that gives me a shallow depth of field. So that is the subject that I'm photographing is in focus, and everything behind is hopefully blurred. I have a fast shutter speed, generally 1,250th of a second, and again I can just change that with my thumb, change the dial with my thumb. Smaller birds generally require a faster shutter speed, whereas the larger birds you can slow it right down to maybe an 800th of a second. If it's something like a willow warbler darting about in the trees, then I'd be setting my shutter speed to about 2,000th of a second. White balance mode, I like mine in cloudy. Most of the weather in the UK is overcast, it's cloudy, and on this camera, cloudy, white balance mode seems to make the colours pop a little bit better rather than auto. So there you have it. That's my top tips for wildlife photography. If you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If there's anything else you want to add, put something in the comments below. And until next time, that's me signing off, and thanks for watching.